My name is Taylor Yowell. We're at the Garden Farmacy LLC in Bolton, Mississippi, northwestern Hinds County here, real close to the Big Black River. We have been out here, my wife and I have been out here on this farm for 8 years now, so it's been a raw experience in that we're trying to turn a piece of land into a productive food forest model that will thrive in our conditions, our climate here in central Mississippi. And that's where the real learning curve kicks in. And so what I want to do is try to explain from a very common sense, practical standpoint, how we can be an example for other landowners or other small businesses or even young and old farmers alike, based on what we've learned here the hard way, but also what we have had success with also. And so it's great to have the opportunity to work with MSU Natural Resources here on this project. And then just also being grateful for the natural resources that Mississippi has, period, and trying to preserve those also through our conservation practices here on the farm. We are primarily a commercial vegetable farm, although we have learned that it is truly challenging to be sustainable as vegetable farmers due to the high input of materials that it takes to stay in production and also to sell the crop, to move the crop. Although we have learned that is the #1 way that gives us the opportunity to stay on our farm while we develop our sustainable food forest model, because you cannot just make this a weekend job and expect to get there. This is almost 10 years in the works at this point, full time. So we are learning how to adapt to the wax and waning of the income, the seasons, the stresses that each of those can bring at the same time sometimes. But we've got a good model, and we've got the ball rolling forward, and that's the most important thing to us. My background is in civil engineering. I graduated with a degree in civil engineering with a land surveying emphasis, and it was a technical degree. It was from a 2-year college, Jones County Junior College in Ellisville, Mississippi, but it was the quickest way that I could get in and out of school and start working. So as I made my way back home to Madison County, Mississippi after graduating college there in 2010, I became very fascinated with natural resources, with trees, with the land through some of the land surveying aspects that I learned, but then also with a natural interest in whole foods, fresh eating, and just feeling good, feeling natural, feeling normal, feeling healthy. And that led me to organic farming. So I was able to really pursue that idea, that model that I had pulled together within my own mind at that time set. And I moved to Northern California to work on certified organic farms, to become trained how to become an organic farmer, not just buy some land and start scratching the dirt up and see what happens. We have been very intent out here at the Garden Farmacy to do things right, to do things with intention, and from a standpoint of not only profitability, but long-term improvements within the land. And so I spent 4 years traveling the country, working on certified organic farms for incredible farmers that were tried and true in their latter experience of farming. They were in their mid to late 60s, and just very important, special people that are within our society that can go quite unknown. And I absorbed everything, and I came back home to Mississippi and started a farm, a lease farm on 2 acres of land in Livingston, Mississippi, at the town of Livingston when they were getting started. And it was a great opportunity. It really helped put me right in the center focus, the limelight there with what they had going on and then organic farming. But then I realized that after my 2-year lease was done, I was done. And so that's when the land search began. And that took 2 years. During that lease phase, wound up here in Bolton. Never really knew the lay of the land or really even had been to the town of Bolton before in my life. But we're just thankful to be in central Mississippi and able to share our experience with people that are interested and people that may not be interested, because natural resources affect us all. And so I hope you enjoy the tour. Our food forest model is based on diversification for resilience. We propagate all the fruit trees here ourselves. We do grafting. Grafting is something that is practically unknown at this time, but it's the only way orchards are created. Grafting gives you the ability, the farmer and or the fruit tree owner, to have the exact variety they are looking for. It's not from a seed that may produce inferior and or inedible fruit even. So it's an orchard that we have put a lot of intention behind to manicure and create accordingly based on our research and experience over the past 10 years doing this. So this is a shell apple tree. It's a variety from Alabama. It's an old southern apple variety, meaning that time and time again it has proven itself within our southern climate, humidity, all the other factors that it's going to produce. It is an apple that doesn't require being sprayed or inputs to grow. It will produce fruit without inputs. They just might be slightly blemished. You can cut the blemishes off. You can utilize the whole entire fruit in a pie or other ways instead of just going for that perfect apple. This is an example of what you can grow in Mississippi, low input, in your backyard, on your farm, in your orchard, and get production. You can see that we've got a really good fruit set here. They have been thinned, so that gives the appearance that there's not as many as there could be, but you have to fruit thin to a certain extent, especially with apples, in order to get the right size apple, especially from a commercial standpoint. But this is just a really fine example of an apple tree that does well here and has been a consistent bearer for us. And you can see more toward the top of the canopy, we did not get around to fruit thinning up there, so it's a little bit more dense in production. But then you may also see there are webworms over to the right-hand side, and that is that's just a natural insect phenomenon where we're going to have some disease, some pest pressure, regardless of what we do, whether we're spraying or not, ultimately. And we just ride with it. We try not to get too bogged down, but it also is important to diversify, we've learned, so that if, say, the webworms were really bad one year and they wanted to take out all your apple trees, well, maybe they're not going to mess with your pears or your muscadine grapes. This is our muscadine vineyard. Muscadines are native to Mississippi. These are improved varieties, so you're not going to really find big fat grapes like this in the wild by any means. You could, but not very typically. And so we've got a really good fruit set this year. This is one crop that has paid off for us in our diversification program, and that with the very warm February we had this year and the late frost, really the late hard freeze in late March, it just really knocked things back pretty good. But the muscadines prevailed, and we've got a good fruit set. So it goes to show the diversification pays off.
How long have you been growing these?
These I planted in 2018 and 2019, those 2 years. So they're 4 or 5 years old, and they require trellising. We have a hard time with keeping the raccoons and possums off of them. As you can see, we're in a forest setting as we create a forest within a forest, and so we still have a lot of pressure with the wildlife, but they're also a natural resource, so we're not out here trapping and shooting all of them.
Right.
We don't even shoot any of them. I'd like to try to start trapping some raccoons, but honestly I just don't have time, and so we're going to try to build a fence around the muscadine vineyard to help add protection.
Right.
Just to kind of keep up with our low input mentality. We don't really have the time for much other than growing and selling our product. This is a variety called Aunt Rachel. It produces a large apple, very large apple, which is incredibly sweet. It's one of our favorite varieties. And then we have a scattering of a lot of other different old southern apple varieties as well throughout here. And then we have a vegetable garden right here with our tomatoes. We also grow a very interesting squash variety from, I believe it's Italy, called Tromboncino. And this is what it looks like. it's just a really nice big old winter squash. I guess I can kind of pull it out here. Wow. So this is an example of sustainable vegetable farming in the food forest setting, where you can get very high calorie, nutrient dense crops without irrigation. Folks always ask us if we use drip tape. Well, we used to, but I got very tired of using it. I pulled it all up and I've never gone back to it. And so we have learned how to catch the rainwater or help absorb as much rainwater as possible, like I mentioned earlier. In these vegetable gardens, we work the soil very deep with a broad fork going down 16 to 18 inches into the soil, and then adding chicken manure and other organic amendments to the soil itself to help build it up year after year after year. And sometimes we don't even fertilize now because either we run out of time or out of supplies, and we just seed. So that deep tillage or that deep breaking up the hard pan and then the good solid tillage with the high quality fertility, it builds up over time, and that's very important for people to realize. We plant things very closely in order to maximize our space. We're on 6 acres out here, so this is not a 150 acre farm. This is a very small family farm setting. We've got to maximize our production to stay in business. We also have nettles and pawpaw trees back here. The grass is starting to get a little bit high. I like to get it just a little bit higher than this, and I come through with the weed whacker, drop it, helps build the mulch layers, helps hold the soil moisture in as well. And that's also a good excuse for just not mowing also. So mowing is a big factor. Grass is a big part of what we deal with out here, and we like to utilize it if possible as a resource. We have our blueberries down here. Some varieties of blueberry, well, not varieties, but I believe blueberries can be native to Mississippi, or at least some vaccinium species certainly are. These varieties have been developed and cultivated over time to produce relatively large fruit. But they love our soil, they love the acidity, they have very fibrous roots, they're a good crop to grow in Mississippi, but the late frost can affect their production also. You really have to have a pretty ideal season to get maximum production. And so once again, we lean back into the emphasis on those native fruits like the muscadine that have good resilience with the changing seasons, and then also the American persimmon is another really, really good one, and the pawpaw tree, which is native here also. So we're trying to, as we create this example, this model, include as many native plants as possible, because they really are valuable natural resources, and the world we live in is not giving them enough credit ultimately, and we're losing them quickly with deforestation. Anything, pollution, just can't get around that fact as much as we try. So we see the value in trying to preserve their ability to grow, and whether it's a sanctuary and or a food forest model. And flanking the guava grove, we have pears. We've got 5 different varieties. We've got the Munson pear, the plum, Munson plum, the Segundo plum, Robusto plum, and then a Japanese variety called the Bruce plum. And these plums, they set an incredible amount of fruit. It just depends on whether we get that late frost or not. These trees were bending over, and then the late frost knocked back the fruit. So it just depends on the year, but plums are a really good one, and they are a native fruit. The Chickasaw plum, other genetics mixed in there are common and native to Mississippi to a certain extent by far. So that's a really good one to be growing for natural habitat and natural pollinators or native pollinators. This is our on-site fruit tree nursery where we sell a lot of native fruit trees, grafted fruit trees, seedlings that are all have the potential to do well in central Mississippi as well as across the country for that matter. This is a honey locust tree. in a 4x10 pot. A lot of our fruit trees are in 4x10 pots, so they're easy to hold. You can come pick up a whole flat of 16, so that really gives the larger landholder or the larger planting the ability to get trees affordably and accessibly, easy to manage, control, and easy for planting this way. We like the idea of creating or selling to people who are interested in restoring wildlife habitat, to hunters that may be interested in boosting their conservation practices, but then also to, like I mentioned earlier, farmers in general that want to try to create a model and or shade. Shade is very important on a farm, no matter what kind of farm it is. And that is one thing to point out, in that what we've realized by trying to be low input, we have foregone the ability to try to keep up with other farmers. We don't use a tractor other than a hand tractor, a BCS, a walk behind with the tiller on it. And so we're able to plant trees that tractors might accidentally run over or would get in the way of a row crop field or something like that. But guess what we get? We get the shade, we get the birds, we get the bees, we get everything that's gonna improve our vegetable production or our annual crop production because of that. So it's just a different mindset. But once again, that is why we have a fruit tree nursery, so that we can provide trees for people, farmers and just private landowners alike, or backyard growers. And they're all propagated off of our farm. These are some of the larger trees, the 5-gallon pots as well, that are grafted varieties of jujubes, persimmons, the fajoya, and then a lot of other native trees in here, like the American persimmon grafts. I'll show you what a grafted fruit tree looks like. This is a 1-year-old, well, it's a 1-year-old rootstock, meaning that's what the scion was grafted onto. So it's about a 2-year-old tree, but 1-year-old graft. And all it is you see this, this yellow beeswax-like grafting seal. We've put this particular variety, this scion, onto the rootstock here. And this is what holds it together, keeps it together after you splice the two pieces of wood together. And this is a grafted fruit tree. And this is how you get the exact variety you're looking for. Say you're looking for a golden delicious apple. This is how you get a golden delicious apple, the scion grafted onto the rootstock. And that's something that we're trying to train more young people on learning how to do is grafting fruit trees. We have pawpaw trees over here. Well, actually, I've got one right here. I'll show you. This is a pawpaw tree, and you need 2 of these to get fruit production. And so sometimes what we'll do to save people a little bit of money is we'll pot up 2 of them together in the same pot. And I think it saves them, obviously it saves them money and time. And I do believe that they'll do quite well growing with each other, as pawpaw trees seem to naturally, or in the wild, grow really close to each other. They seem to like, I guess, community. So that's one way of trying to help our customers or motivate them to experiment with growing native plants and increasing their own natural resources there. We have some of the American persimmon seedlings over here. They look quite similar to the pawpaw in some ways. The leaves are relatively similar, but these are probably our 2 most common nursery trees at the Garden Farmacy, are going to be persimmons and pawpaws primarily. And they're novelty fruits in a lot of ways. People are really seeking pawpaws out, grafted American persimmons out, really just for their own benefit, not so much from a commercial standpoint, but just to have a consistent fruiting, sweet, unique fruit tree in their yard. And so what we're learning as we get further and further into our experiment is that really we're attracting all kinds of people, but then also trying to make sure we're sending them home or providing them with the resources they need to be successful. And that's been very hard for us to create this model, because we've had to pull together those external resources ourselves. There really are, there's not that much information, and or I can't just hop in the car, go down the road and get some very high quality pawpaw or American persimmon genetics in pots. So we have to not only experiment, but we also have to be the providers for that experiment too. Fruit tree nurseries are becoming harder and harder to find. Garden centers are not. And they both have to work together to provide the customer quality plants. And I've seen it hit and miss around the country. But some of the fruit tree nurseries that we are inspired by and have gathered and collected trees from over the years are Fruitwood Nursery in California, England's Orchard Nursery in Kentucky. These are incredible nurserymen and farmers that are leading the way that we aspire to. We're just trying to replicate or create a model upon some replication of their model, but just in central Mississippi instead of California, instead of Kentucky. And so we're far in between, and we've got a lot of weight on our shoulders to be successful, especially from a financial standpoint. And so there really needs to be more effort with state and local governments, in my opinion, to support folks like us. But we're not too worried about it because we like the challenge of being responsible to know that we're not funded. We create our own living, and it only increases our ability to maintain under stressful periods, whether it's a heat dome like we're currently in right now. We're under excessive heat warnings, which put a lot of pressure on not only us, the cameraman, but also the plants and the animals themselves. So we're kind of, we're happy that we have pushed as hard as we have over the past 8 years out here to create shade, to create an ability for the soil to maintain its moisture to grow plants for situations like this specifically. So it's very ironic that here we are today making this film for MSU Natural Resources under the given conditions.